This presentation, titled The Future of Auditing After the Pandemic, comes to us from Thea Laufs. Thea's mission throughout the last 28 years has been to improve the food safety culture and assist with the food safety and quality standards trend setting in South Africa. Her experience and expertise includes more than 25 years of auditing across all the industries, including, but not limited to, food and packaging manufacturing, QSR, restaurants, hotels, abattoirs, and farms in South Africa. In addition, she is an internationally certified lead auditor in food safety and quality. She participates on various industry committees, SANS, SACHA, RMMA, FSSC, etc., and is always keen to share her technical expertise and guidance to industry. In 2009, Thea acquired the Agency for Africa for CPG Global and has grown her client base throughout her dedication, commitment, and passion for the industry. Her vast experience and knowledge base was the reason she was appointed Technical Director for Food Safety for CPG internationally back in 2015. And with that, take it away, Thea.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting us to be part of the Food Safety Expo 2021. CPG is an Australian-based company and have offices in 22 countries. And as you were saying, I've been appointed as the Technical Director for all the countries in terms of food safety. CPG provides certification and training to various companies based on ISO systems, but I specialize in the food safety side of the business. The new norm, as we are saying, what will the impact be on auditing? Does it vary from industry to industry? Will it work in the food industry, and can we guarantee that we can still provide the assurances of certification or not? But before we answer that question, let's look at what is an audit and the requirements of a good auditor. I will use examples out of the food industry purely because that is my expertise as food safety auditor and trainer for the last few years. If we look at what is an audit, it's a snapshot of the site at a particular date and time. So you can't see everything, but you have to make sure that you are auditing to guarantee that when you certify a facility, they comply to the requirements that you're auditing against. So why do we audit? To ensure that we are all complying to the legislations. For example, the Health and Act, the Foodstuffs Cosmetics Act, Meat Safety Act, and to ensure some of our scheme requirements are compliant to as well. To highlight any food safety risk which may exist on the site, which has a direct effect on a product or customer, protect the brand and improve your food safety management systems. That is the reasons why we are doing the audits. What does an auditor use to audit while he's on the site? I always ask a few questions. What have to be done? When? Where? How? And who is responsible for that specific job? And that is the questions that we always use as auditors when we do the auditing part. But we as CPG have started using a risk-based approach. During the presentation, you will see and hear a lot about risk-based approach. And that is a new way of auditing. But we're still looking at legal compliance as well as compliance to our schemes such as FSSC or ISO 22000. Next slide. An auditor uses the following while he's looking at the facilities. The type of audit you require, so that is part of your planning, which is the auditor that you're going to send. Is the auditor competent or not? Are you sending an auditor that is specialized in meat to a dairy plant, for example, or a food manufacturing plant making sauces? Those are the requirements that you need to make sure you do as part of the planning. The auditor that you need to send has to be competent. We're looking at where does the auditor spend most of their times? In the boardroom, which is my pet subject. I hate that when auditors spend most of the times in the boardroom instead of on the floor. But you also have to have the balance in the sense of looking at floor, looking at paperwork to get to your conclusion whether the facility complies or not. What is the outcome? What do you expect? And what is a critical, major, and minor finding? How do you know how to decide if a finding that you have is a major or a minor? And do you have the evidence to base your findings on? Daily we see product recalls in our food industry or hear about people getting sick or hospitalized due to food poisoning, or for example, listeriosis or salmonella outbreaks. When you audit, you have to look at the risk of these hazards. Where do we see this? For example, if you look in a facility and there's cooling units with dripping water or drains that could have possible listeria, rust on equipment, damaged conveyor belts. Now remember, this is when we talk about remote auditing later on. Will you be able to see this through a camera? The risk-based approach has been especially seen with COVID pandemic and auditing since, based on IIF requirements, we as CBs had to complete risk assessments on each of our clients to determine if it was possible to postpone the audit or to explore the use of technology or suspend the client till we could get on site again. The risk that is imposed has always been critical in auditing, and we now see more emphasis being placed on risk-based auditing, as I said before. How does remote auditing impact on your decision-making in this scenario? Before the audit, this stays the same as planning. You have to make sure that when you have sent an auditor out, that they specifically know what is their role and where do they have to be. What has changed due to COVID pandemic? Why did it change is the question. Remote audits, either partial or full, was implemented because of this. Technology that we use, like today, Zoom or Skype or Teams, some people use drones and cameras and videos. That all started becoming part of an audit and any other business way of operating these days. Personnel safety, the staff, the auditor, all had to comply to certain requirements to ensure protection and compliance to the regulations. But remember, this is also part of the ISO 22000 clause in terms of emergency preparedness. However, did we look at pandemics before, or did we only focus on, is there water, is there electricity? What will happen if that is not there? But now we realized pandemics is also part of it. Now, if you look at this example that I put on here for you in terms of the pictures on the bread, we've done a little experiment to see if we take bread slices and we touch it with our hands, whether when we washed it or sanitized it, what is the effect in terms of bacteria contamination? If you look at the slide, you'll see, number one, we just wiped our hands on the bread and you can see the result. If you look at picture number 2, there's nothing. That means your hands was washed and cleaned. If you look at the other slides, you can see that even if you only wash your hands or only sanitize, it does not have the same effect. You must use both at the same time. So hand washing and sanitizing is most definitely still very important. In food factories, you can see the picture there. This is the way that we are addressing when we work in a food facility. This quickly has become the norm outside. We also wear masks. We have to look at hand washing and sanitizing. But safety is always our priority. But if you look at food production units, what have changed during this COVID times? What did we have to look at? Production lines, how do you keep the distance between people that have to work on production lines? Sometimes you cannot change that because it is hand operation. Different shifts had to be implemented. How do you manage your production and the demand if you have to do different shifts? Is there replacement staff for the role if that person is off or sick or in quarantine? If you think about your quality assurance personnel or your QC staff, do you have replacement for those now working different shifts? How is services still adhered to, for example, pest control? People coming from the outside, do you still make use of them? Is it safe to let them on site? And what is your controls that you implemented because of COVID? If facilities had to be closed down and reopened, did you look at your cleaning procedures? Did you adapt it to make sure that a facility that was closed for a couple of months needs a deeper cleaning than normal before you do operations? Let's look at remote auditing now. Before COVID, audits consisted of travel, which could go from a half day to a full day, man days for the auditing and travel back, which resulted in a 3 to 5 day audit, of which 1 to 3 could be traveling. Now, a lot of people assume that this will bring down the cost of an audit now that it's going to be remotely done, but no, it's not. Your on-time audit is still conducted by a trained, qualified, experienced auditor that's still going to use the man days to audit according to your requirements. For example, FSSC and ISO 22000 describes that a certain amount of days are required to perform an audit. Now, in the midst of a global pandemic, the logistics of an on-site audit seem even more complex. New safety measures requiring social distancing, face coverings, many food manufacturers have had to train new employees, establish the shifts, as I said, and reoccurring cleaning protocols. Arranging now an audit on top of that seems very overwhelming. With travel restrictions and mandated quarantine procedures, how do we do the audits? Thank goodness to advanced technology, CPG have been implementing this based on the guidance of IAF and scheme owners, which resulted in either full on-site or fully remote audits, or a blended combination of on-site and remote audits. By combining experienced and trained competent auditors and new technology, each audit achieved the same level of rigor as traditional on-site audits. However, some clients still require the full on-site audit, and this is conducted in a safe and efficient manner. So we do provide either the option of remote, on-site, or a combination. What is remote audits? Using various platforms, available or company-specific software, it can still be a challenge sometimes. It's a new way of doing things. And I think all of us have come together hearing, I think you're on mute. We cannot hear you. Sorry, my internet is slow. Or in some areas, we might not have electricity. So your remote audit is not always possible. What do you do in that scenarios? Where do we audit online or remotely? This consists of documentations. So that is what you use mostly for your on-site and your online audits. It includes policies, procedures, records, and you can also now do your online interviews, but you have to schedule those up front. When you use cameras and remote video auditing, it can be used at facilities, but also remember, the security cameras can be used so that the auditor can actually still do the walkthrough, as would it have been done on-site audit. This can work wonderful, however, you're still reliant on the person showing you what to see. Is this effective? We don't know. We all have to accept that this is a new norm. Auditing will have to adapt, and I look forward to the future and the possible new innovative resolutions that we'll uncover in the next few months and future. It's all new to us, but we have to take on the challenge. Remember, this is part of our ISO clause 8.4 that you must have in your food safety system. Now let's look at that clause 8.4. It describes emergency preparedness and response. And if you look at the section, it does say public health emergencies. Now, as I said earlier, it's something that we didn't have to look for before, but now it is actually part of our lives. You have to write this into your food safety system and make sure, because you are going to get audited on this clause. What did you do in terms of your COVID preparedness? Do you have all your systems in place? And have you done your risk assessments? Steps of remote auditing. I've put on the slideshow for you here. 8 steps that is followed in terms of remote auditing. Remember, the planning is still the same. Nothing has changed except for all your on-site meetings that used to happen is now going to be remotely done. So you have to schedule your interviews at specific times. You schedule your audit, you perform the audit, and my advice is, before the audit is conducted, do a trial run to see if all your IT is working, because sometimes there's a lot of glitches. Once the audit is conducted, you will have your closing. The same process will follow as that's normally happen in an audit. At the end, you will still receive your reports and your non-conformances, but there will be a lot of emailing to get your non-conformances signed off, where normally we would have done it on site. So those type of changes will happen, and you as auditor have to adapt to those changes. Earlier, we spoke about examples of dripping cooling units, damaged conveyor belts in factories, and the risk of listeria, for example. How will you as an auditor now look at those possible risks if you have to make use of a camera or a video? If the auditor is showing it, Will you be able to smell that something is off or the drain is blocked? Will you be able to see body languages of people? And that is the tools that we normally have used as auditors that you cannot use anymore. So you have to make quite a big adjustment when you audit now using camera facilities. How will you be able to identify if a problem is a minor or a major? Will you have enough evidence based on your camera and video recording to make that decision? These relate to you as an auditor will have to communicate with the person that's walking through that is now your eyes and ears. If you want to ask another question or want them to turn the camera, that communication must happen. Because remember, it's still somebody walking on your behalf. What is the pros of this new way of auditing? And remember, there's always pros and cons. And at the end of the day, we all have to make that decision whether it's possible or not to do these audits. Let's look at the pros. Audits can still be conducted in this difficult time, so at least we can still verify food safety in our facilities. Expanded pool of auditors are now available because a lot can now audit online and not have to travel. There is definitely a reduced cost in travel, so that will save money for the manufacturers that we audit. So it's a cost saving due to less accommodation and travel. Remote interviews can be scheduled upfront and ensuring all required personnel is available. Improved documentation review. Now, what do I mean here? The auditor will be able to spend a lot more time reviewing documents at their own time because there is no rush in terms of getting the audit done in a certain time frame. There's also less stress for the person supplying the documents that they can do this now before the audit, and it's a lot more calmer at the end of the day. What is the cons? First-hand observations cannot be replaced. The seeing the process as you walk in, your first impressions, the body language, noticing smells and odors, as I say, that is something that you now have lost. You cannot see that through a camera. Does the facility have a Wi-Fi? And is it strong enough? Is there Wi-Fi connection throughout the plants, outside, all the areas that you need to see? That can sometimes be quite a big problem. Is the video streaming not showing panel vision? Remember, the person taking you through is working for the facility. And will they show you everything that you as a trained auditor wants to see to identify the possible risk? Is the area not too noisy? As we all know, in some industries, it is very noisy, even as an auditor walking through the facility. Now you're doing it via a video or camera. Will you be able to interview staff because of the noise, or do you have to schedule that afterwards? Technology glitches. We all know about those. That can happen the day of the audit, and you must be prepared to make changes and adapt to that glitches that might happen. And the big thing that I know is required by a lot of the scheme owners is unannounced audits. This will not be able to happen because you have to schedule these audits upfront and make arrangements with your client that you audit. Innovation and transformation is a focus of business and include audit programs as well. That includes video streaming, drones used, artificial intelligence, but the glamour of technology should not cloud our auditing requirements to ensure compliance, but use as a tool to assist. But please let us know, we do not want to forget food safety. It is our priority as well, and audits must be conducted to ensure that we produce a safe food for our consumer. We cannot now have a pandemic and food safety issues as well. The future of auditing, like everything else in these challenging times, need to be adaptable and fluid. There is going to be a lot of change and frustrations in the near future as we all try to navigate these uncharted waters. Our focus needs to be adaptable on short notice, and remember that all decisions should be risk-based and unique to that specific company, but still compliant to our requirements. Therefore, my opinion is that remote auditing is not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's not a replacement of an on-site or in-person audit, but it's part of a multi-year assurance program. And in times like this pandemic we live in, remote auditing can play a part and provide assurance when special circumstances require it. Thank you very much, and please stay safe.
Thank you, Thea Laufs, for your perspective on what the future holds for auditing following COVID. And that concludes this presentation.